Hi, my name is Alyssa Pengra, and I'm going to be reviewing and highlighting some things from my EDL non-degree endorsement portfolio. So I'll start with the candidate info contents. I've included my artifact folder, and I tried to organize this a little bit with putting some additional folders in here where I have pictures, slides, and then some video, audio, and then I kind of have a little bit of miscellaneous that maybe I didn't feel like fit in one of those categories. I have my presentation that I did for my personal goals. This was good because it was much easier for me to think about what I want to accomplish and what ideas I have for the next 1 to 5 years. It was definitely harder to think 6 to 10 years out or beyond 10 years, just because I see so many possibilities for different directions that could go. But it was really good to think about that and kind of have that in mind. Then I have my leadership philosophy. This was something that was actually a pretty challenging task for me to complete, just because I feel like I identify with a lot of different things, and I've seen lots of traits and styles in different leaders that I admire and that I think are good and that work well. So trying to really put that all together into kind of a cohesive vision of this is what I really identify with was definitely a challenging task, but I hope that I accomplished that well. A person that inspires me and that I definitely pull a lot of ideas from is Brene Brown, which I referenced in here. I've read a lot of her work, listened to her podcasts, and other various mediums, and she definitely inspires kind of some of my thoughts on leadership and education as well. Then we've got my plan of study, which just lists out the different courses that I took. I did 18 credit hours last year between August and June. I ended up taking this fall semester off because I was a practicum supervisor myself of a school psychology student, so I really needed to focus on that, and then was able to finish out my practicum this spring. Then we've got my program completion timeline, where I just kind of went through and documented, my timeline in education and my timeline for this program, and again, getting me to think ahead of next year and all the years beyond, which are a little fuzzy the further you get out, but I think still worthwhile to think about for sure. Then I've got my resume in here, which lists out all my experience as a school psychologist the last 11 years and different leadership roles that I've had while here, as well as my other experience in education. So getting into the activities portion of the ePortfolio, I have my annotated bibliography first. This was definitely a challenging task in terms of just the sheer amount of reading and processing and thinking that was required for all of this, and trying to find good resources to really answer each one of these questions, and then summarizing it and thinking about it and reflecting. But overall, I think that I did a good job with this, and I think that every article I found was good, but there were a few for sure in here that were just really fantastic, kind of next level, that I'll definitely be coming back to in the future, because I'll want to refresh myself on some of those concepts and things that I pulled from there. So a lot of work, but I think a lot of information and knowledge gained from this as well. The next part is the activity log, where I was just able to input all the activities that I did at the secondary, district, and elementary level, and made sure to hit every single one of those components and activities. Then on the activity component tracker, just another way that you can see which ones I checked off at which level. And I used this all throughout the practice. I kept coming back to this almost obsessively to look at it and make sure that I was getting the right boxes checked off in the right categories, and just trying to make sure it's all perfect and every I dotted and T crossed. Okay, district level activity artifacts slideshow. So I will just kind of try to briefly go through here. A lot of my experience, some of my experience with district came from being a practicum supervisor myself. That's this first one, where I got to have a lot of opportunity to cultivate ethical behavior in others, and one of those big ones was my school psychology practicum students. And I'll just kind of highlight, I included this as part of my district for the communication part because it was a really great opportunity to learn or really to put together information that I had gathered about the community in which I work. And then, let's see, I'm just going to skip ahead here to the KEEP evaluation. I really liked this activity, and I think it was really valuable. I got to review 2 different teachers and with 2 completely different things that they were doing. So one was teaching a math lesson at the elementary level. The other one was, I think, was a middle school level student, and it involved kind of working with him through like a social emotional behavioral intervention about how to be less disruptive in class. So I got to see 2 really different things and provide feedback, and hopefully that was a meaningful experience for them as well. Then I've got my elementary slideshows, and I'll just kind of quickly go through some of these. This first one, this was an experience I did this year where we redesigned our student assistance teams forms. So the forms that we use for documenting student concerns and interventions and problem solving. We migrated that from a Google Doc to Google Slides, and that was driven by, I had a committee of teachers kind of help me on this. I wanted their input, and I also wanted their buy-in, because this is always something that is hard to get staff to really fill out every year. So I thought that if they were in charge of helping to create it and had a lot of voice in what it looked like, that would hopefully go a long way in the school year. It still wasn't perfect. We still didn't get, everyone to be able to fill this out like they're supposed to, but I think it was important to try to get their input for that. And then kind of skip ahead a little bit here on some things. This was a picture. This is me. A lot of my hours came from facilitating SAT and CARE meetings. So that's just what we call our student problem solving building or team in my 2 different buildings. And that was a big component of helping, really engaging faculty and gathering, synthesizing, using data to evaluate, how our curriculum and assessment processes and practice are all working together. This was a good experience for me. This is where I really got to advocate to a greater need than I've really had to in the past with some kids that were in foster care, whose biological parents we were not able to connect with to move along in some special education processes for these girls. So I got to work with DCF and Families Together and some other agencies to coordinate an educational advocate for these girls so that we could get them the services and support they need. So that was a huge learning experience, and something that just I didn't know was going to happen this year, but it did, and it presented this great opportunity for me to learn and really fulfilled one of these standards as well. And then let's see here. This is also one that ended up being a lot of hours for me. Probably it was more hours than this actually than I even listed, but modeling and fostering effective communication, I do that through leading evaluation meetings. That's one way that I do it. And like I said, it's actually far more than 60 hours a year, but I'm doing this for hours and hours on a weekly basis. But just through those meetings and the before and after of those meetings, I feel like that is one way that I have modeled and fostered effective communication with my families and with my school teams. This was in regards to a presentation I gave at the beginning of the year on our problem-solving process and intervention process at one of my schools, and then I followed that up with going to PLCs for the first few weeks of the school year to talk about how they would fill out the paperwork and those forms for students that they have concern over. Okay, so going to the secondary slideshow, this is where I really ended up I was kind of dreading this one the most as far as just doing the secondary activities because it was going to take me out of my buildings. I spent time over at this other middle school that I don't work at and working with the principal and resource teacher and doing these activities, but it ended up being kind of what I got the most from. So this one is where part of my evaluation for kind of the mission and vision statement was really breaking down what those were and then talking with staff about them. And I put those clips together in a few different audio clips of just kind of getting some feedback on on how they think that these are going this year. So that was a fun activity to do. And then this was also a great learning activity. The pictures are from a meeting that we had with our SRO officer, where he talked through some procedures about what to do when students share some sensitive information and we think there might be a danger at home. And he just kind of talked us through these procedures and helped us understand the why behind that, which was insightful and something I didn't really know before this. So I was really glad that I got to be part of that conversation. This was a great learning experience, looking through these surveys that the school had taken, and there was so much information to go through and gain from that. And it just made me think that's such a valuable resource when you're trying to learn about a school's culture and climate and how people feel, whether it's students, the teachers, the parent community. So again, huge learning experience on this, and I found that to be super valuable. I'll go ahead to, this was a resource I really enjoyed making. It was to help, this is, parents will ask, what can we do over the summer for our kids? How can we keep them engaged and busy? And I wanted to come up with something that gave some ideas that were maybe not quite as typical as what everyone might automatically think of. So I found a bunch of great resources all across the Kansas City area, put them together in this, and I'm really proud of the information that I was able to put together for this, and I hope that it's helpful for families. And then this was good that I got to see a lot of different, this also helped me with the mission and vision statements and the school culture evaluation, but being able to spend a lot of time in different classes and kind of seeing what that's like in the middle school environment. Okay, so then next I have the administrative verification document that I uploaded, so you can see all three of my administrators signing off on that. And then finally the ePortfolio program reflection and kind of my thoughts going into this. And I'll just try to do a quick summary, but as far as what did I think before, I really didn't know. I did know I was overwhelmed from the little bit of what I knew it would require. I was kind of overwhelmed by all the different pieces, but then at the same time, I also felt like, okay, I know that I do so many leadership things within my building, but also at a district level. So I felt like this is going to be easy. I'm going to have all this covered. It's just going to be a matter of doing all this, work to go with it. I almost felt starting like I didn't really necessarily think I was going to gain much from this class. But that, as if you read through this, you'll see that definitely changed along the way. And I realized, first of all, this was both easier and harder than I thought, but mostly harder actually, just because there were so many components to this, and I underestimated the time and effort that it would require. And as far as, end result of what I think, I realized that there was actually quite a bit that I gained from this experience. And one thing that jumps out very easily is just the experience that I had at the secondary level, because that is not something I was getting, in my current role, and it's not something I would have sought out had it not been absolutely required. But I'm glad I did, because it allowed me to reconnect with an old administrator that I'd previously worked with when he was an elementary principal. Now he's a middle school principal, and I got to, reconnect with him and work with him on some things and really get some experiences that I didn't have in my role, and I wouldn't have had otherwise. And not only that, but just this whole process and everything that I ended up having to do, from writing my leadership philosophy and researching all these articles, they really did add a dimension of depth that I didn't have before. And that was really noticeable in an interview I had earlier this week, where they asked me questions on leadership and they asked me questions on equity and inclusion. And it just was kind of, I think, especially in that moment, where it really tied back to everything I've been doing this semester, but really throughout this whole program. So I at the end of this, I have much more appreciation for what I've just done than I had at the beginning of it, for sure. So that wraps up my ePortfolio, and thank you so much for watching and reading everything, and I hope you enjoyed it.